Hey guys, how you going? So nice of you to join me. Thank you very, very much for giving me your time. Today I'd like to talk about a specific type of photography today, and that's macro photography. Now that's the photography of things very, very tiny. The word macro or micro can both be used. It's synonymous, just depends on language translation, I suppose, from various countries. They don't always get it exactly according to the English structure. But the point of it being, it is the photoing of things very tiny. And generally a lot of it's done with bugs and jewellery and that sort of a theme. So I'm going to run you through all the different price options and choices and a lot of tips and little tricks that make it just so much more enjoyable. You see, any sort of photography can be exciting. But if you're not getting the results that you're really desiring from the get-go, then you're going to get very disappointed quickly. So a few prime little tips and helpers will get you on the right track to getting great results from day one. Now for those who are a bit more experienced with the macro photography and just looking for a little trick or tip here and there, I've got some of that for you as well, and things you may have seen or not thought about using, or ways and manners in which to do it. So stay tuned, and I hope I can be useful to everybody. Now I've been doing macro for about 7 years myself. I'm more of a portrait photographer or landscape photographer, but I do enjoy a variety of different photography, and I think having various interests mixes up the works and keeps your interest going. So I'll get a time period where I'm focusing on maybe birds, then I'll do a lot of portraits, maybe a wedding, then I'll go to landscaping, and we do back and forth, and that keeps everything fresh and exciting, and also gives you the chance to try out different skills. And the skills you learn in one thing can often be applied with a slight variation to another style of photography, and the more skills you gain and the more techniques that you develop, the better overall your photography will become, because any challenge will become natural and not so scary. So today we're going to be using the Nikon Z7, which I have right in front of me here, and I have on the 24-70 2.8S lens. Now when it comes to macro photography, it's very important to understand that the actual lens or camera you use isn't the most important thing. It's really all about your techniques and your settings. So whether you have a very expensive camera or not, a crop sensor camera or full frame, that's not really important and not going to make a massive difference to your photography with macro. What's going to make a big difference is getting the subject in focus and getting in close and tight enough to really get some detail. So what can we use as an aid to do this? Well, you can of course buy specific macro lenses to put on your cameras. Regardless of brand or style of camera, every manufacturer sells a specific macro lens or two. Nikon sell many, and they had been doing this of course for 50 plus years. One of their most popular macro lenses is the 105 2.8, and it's a prime lens, and it's specifically for macro, but can also be used for portraiture at that 105 focal length. That's very convenient. I'm not going to say it's the best portrait lens, although it does quite a capable and sufficient job. So in this instance I'm using, as I say, the 24-70, and I'm not going to be able to take any macro photos with that exclusively, because if I don't have any helpers on board, what I'm going to get is just very little subject in a very broad frame. So what I need to do is enable myself to concentrate in, and so the first thing I do is choose a focal length that's more suitable. So we're not going to start off on the 24 end nice and wide, we're going to go relatively long to about 70 mils. And what we're going to use as an aid to gaining close-in focus. And I'll tell you a nice cheap option you can get started with, that is this here, these extension tubes. Now here we have Viltrox. Viltrox have very kindly manufactured a specific Z-mount extension tube set, and I'm just about to try this out. Now I've had it for about a week, and I'd like to show it to you right now and demonstrate it to you. So it comes in this wonderful little box, of course, with the brand Viltrox on the picture what it is. It does say specifically Z-mount on the cover there, so you know it's going to be compatible. Now the beauty of this one particularly, and it's not necessarily the cheapest, they're around $70. There are cheaper versions out there, but the beauty of this one is it is specifically a Z-mount adapter for my Z-mount camera, but also it has all the connections that enable such things as autofocus and TTL metering and so on. So that gives you full operational capability of your camera with all the options. And that's something that's really important. With macro photography, let's be honest, you don't often use autofocus. You can, and all the photos that I'm going to show you today, where I'm doing some macro photography, and my samples over the last few weeks having this item, are all going to be taken with autofocus. And that's just simply to demonstrate that it is possible and it can be achieved. But really, the recommendation is manual focus, and I'll explain exactly why in a minute. So let's first do a little box opening here for you, and you'll see what's inside. So actually, you see firstly that it is very, very well protected. They come in a foam box there, and it's padded, and that way it's never going to get damaged. So this is the unit here. But the box I recommend you definitely keep, because having a box that's padded like that and well labelled just means you can always find the thing when it's in your cupboard because it's identified, and secondly it's well foam padded so you're not going to damage it. So that's a great box. Do definitely keep boxes like that for your accessories. Keep them safe and easy to find. This is the item here. It's nothing much particularly remarkable to look at visually, but it is suitable to the Nikon system, and I'll demonstrate that when I put it on and I show you how beautifully compatible it is. So yes, it is. This is what we would call the starting point in macro photography, extension tubes. Specific macro lens is obviously where we would like to head later, but this still will give you awesome results and empower you to use accessories you already have, your lens, your camera, without any serious modification or big expense. I mean, let's face it, if you're trying something new that you've never done before, you don't necessarily want to outlay, $2,000 on a very high quality lens, because you may find you don't like it or never use it. So the simple solution is you start off with something cheap and simple that helps you adapt your gear that you consistently have now, and then not have to make a big financial commitment to something you may or may not find works for you. So how do we put this adapter onto the camera? Well, it's really, really simple. They give you little caps to protect it, but you can see the elements in here. There is no glass whatsoever. That's important to mention. This is literally a tube. You put your finger right through it. There's nothing in there. It's really just to give you extension, which empowers you then to get in close to a subject. It changes the minimal focal distance. So this camera and lens combination here will have a minimum focal distance of about a meter or just maybe a bit less. But with these adapters on, it goes down to about 1 inch. So you're really, really close to your subject, and that of course expands the size of the object. So let me just show you putting it on. It is really quite simple. You just disconnect your lens very carefully. I'll put it onto the lens to show you here how it all goes. But you see that there is a protruding end and that there is a cup end. And inside both sides you'll see these little gold connectors. Both sides have them. And you have gold connectors on your lens. So the quickest way I find to connect them together is just find the gold connectors on your adapter, find the gold connectors on your lens, and you'll find that it's not going to take too long to get that together. It's only a slight little jiggle and clicks on very firmly. Now to put it onto the camera is the same as putting any lens on. There we go, just line up those connectors, or you can line up the dots. They always give you little white dots to help you and aid you with connecting things up. You can follow those along too if you want to. But if you have a look at the item here now, as I put it up to the camera and the lights, you can see how that the finish, the colouring, the silver for example and the matte black are very much inherent with the Z system. So it looks as though it's part of the deal. It does look like a purchased item. It doesn't look like something bright orange and connected on and a bit random. It's really beautifully put together and finished. So I feel very proud of having that on the camera, and I have a lot of dignity using it. You may think that it's something maybe a bit embarrassing or shameful to have a cheap option for macro, but that is absolutely not the case. The quality of your lens and your camera is what's giving you all the results. The reason we're having these adapter tubes, as I've mentioned earlier, is simply to change your minimum focal distance. So now you can simply get in closer to your subject, but the quality of your images is all dependent on the camera and the lens you use. So if you've got a beautiful camera and lens system that gives you lovely sharp images, the adapters will not alter that in any way because there's no glass in them to change the image quality. It's just bringing you in tighter. So let me demonstrate how that sort of looks when you get a subject. So I've got a little subject here handy, and I'll just bring it up. It's for the purpose of demonstration purposes, and you might be able to see I put a little paper crane onto these little pot plant, and it's sort of simulating really there that if you had let's say a grasshopper or a bug in the tree and you wanted to take a close-up photo. So we'll use this as a little simulation for the day. I'll turn it around to me so I can actually see what I'm doing when I'm illustrating. But before we take any photos, the most important thing with macro is actually the lighting. You've got to have a lot of light. And that's relating to the actual settings that you need to apply to the camera to get results. See, when you're getting in, and I'm illustrating, if you get in really tight and close to a subject, what they're doing is it's altering your depth of field. It's very much like taking headshots in portraiture. You can illustrate it the same way. The further back you get, the more stuff you get in focus. But the closer you get to the person's face, the shallower the depth of field is, regardless of your aperture. Now, if you've got a very narrow aperture already, you're shooting, say, with a prime at 1.8, which already has a very shallow depth of field, and then you're getting close to someone's face, all of a sudden you've got one eye in focus and the other one's out of focus and blurry, because your depth of field is that narrow. That principle applies exactly the same to macro photography. The closer you get into the subject, the shallower your depth of field. The bigger the magnification, yes, but the shallower the depth of field. So your settings cannot be the same as if you're doing sort of portraiture. You've got to have a look at having a very, very large number of f-stop. And by that I'm talking about, instead of 1.8, you're going to be shooting at f8 or f11 or greater. So f8 is really your starting point, and f11 I've found to be pretty much ideal, providing you've got enough light. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to become the masters of light and don't be the victims of it. There'll be a lack of light when you do macro photography, and the first thing we can do to increase our lighting is remove the lens hood. The lens hood is your enemy in photography with macro, because what it's doing now is creating a shade. See, the whole purpose of this shade device is to block the light from getting into the lens. That is a disaster when you're engulfing the subject, because this thing now is blocking all your light from entering into the lens. So what we've got to do now is take the hood off, and then we can take a photo and get in close without shading the subject unnecessarily. So that's first tip number one, remove the lens hood. Second tip we're going to do is we're going to make the settings right, and we talked about that. So we're going to be looking at setting and starting off, say, at f8 to f11, and we're going to want a shutter speed. I would recommend, and this is not a law, but I would recommend a shutter speed of something to 200 of a second up to 1,000th of a second, depending on the situation and your light, and also the subject. If you're photoing a still life subject, like let's say it's a ring you're taking a photo of, or a watch. If you're taking a macro photo of a watch, that watch isn't running away anywhere, is it? It's going to stay still. So you can have a much slower shutter speed to help you gain light. But if you're taking a photo of a little twitchy little bug that's jiggling around like a bee and collecting pollen and a flower, that thing's not moving still at all, then what you've got to do is increase your shutter speed to capture the moment. And another thing that'll help you with capturing that life and action is flash. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using flash to help light our subjects. But the dilemma is, if I were to put this on the camera right now and just take a photo, and I'm in like this, where is the flash pointing? The flash is pointing over the subject, away from it. So it's going to do almost nothing, not particularly useful. Now there are those that will say, well, what you can do then is you can use your little flash bounce card there. See, they're little white, and it'll knock the light down slightly. And yes, it will do a little bit, but it's still not getting it directly on your subject, and that's what we're going to want to achieve. So there are accessories and helpers we can use to get that flash light onto the subject. And remember, shooting at f8, maybe a higher shutter speed, and with the camera really overshadowing the subject, it's a very good chance that you're not getting a lot of natural light from ambient light from the sun or anything on your subject. Sometimes you can be very careful and tricky, and you can get just around the right angle and you can manage to get the sun on your subject, but you can't rely on that because you don't know what angle the subject is going to turn at any moment, and you may need to compensate by turning around and blocking the sun. You want to be in control of the light, not a victim of it, hey? So what we're going to do is I'll just take this apart, make that safer. Actually, I'll give myself a little bit more room here, just remove some of these items. Won't be needing any of those for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate some little tools and helpers for your flash to make things a bit more specific. So we'll start off first on a little diffuser dome. And the principle of the diffuser dome is that what we're doing here is we're softening the light too. I mean, this sort of a harsh specular light directly on your subject is going to increase the shadows tenfold, going to make it extremely heavy dark shadows, and also very specular light on your subject. It's not pretty, it doesn't look nice. So in order to increase that, what we're going to do is we are going to use the bounce card in this situation because we're containing where the light's going. And what we can do is fit this little adapter. Now this is a Celine's product. I'll try and put it up here so you can actually see what I'm doing. This is sort of like a first stage step of what we can do. So I'll try and get this on. Put the bounce card down first, that'll help. Just stretching it over the camera. It's not really all this hard, but my dilemma here is that I'm just doing everything a little bit backwards to demonstrate it to you. So there it is there, it's on. As you can see, it's got little magnets. And inside this item here, there are also magnets. So the magnets inside here connect onto this. So the fitting of it is very simple. It just sits on and stays where it's put. But we will use that bounce card this time, because we don't have to use the diffusion part, but we'll use the bounce card. If I can get the bounce card just out of the line. There we go. So we've got the benefit of this full strength of the light. This is going to be the diffusion anyway. The bounce card will now help deflect the light down. So what we're going to do is go and place it in without pushing the card, the bounce card, back into the camera. So now the card is sitting on top here, and it's bouncing the light down. And because it's a diffused area here, the light is bouncing down and coming into the general direction of your subject. So I have used this on multiple occasions, and it does work really well. And here now we can get in and take our photo. If we were to take the photo now, this light is generally coming down and is diffused. So for about $50 you can get an accessory like this that actually does work quite well. It's very efficient and functions nicely. There are other options. The next option I would like to show you is a really cool one. I've shown this before. It's called the Flash Bender. It's a bounce card, a giant bounce card, reflective plate. And what it does, it enables you to manipulate it in any way you wish with these rods inside it, and that helps you to shape the light in any way you want. Now that's shaping the light is something we're really trying to do here. We want to get that light on the subject, not just generally in the area. So how do we fit that? Well, it's really quite simple. I'll just illustrate for you. So what we do here, I'll just open the flash up because it's a bit easier when it's sitting flat. We simply put it over. It has like a little belt design where you thread it through that little attachment there, little buckle if you like, and put the Velcro down, and that was as simple as it was. That's how easy it is to attach. And that's not going anywhere, that's going to stay where we want it. So we'll attach that to the camera now, and we'll start learning about how we can shape our light. So there we are, it's on. Now if we were to take the photo like that, that'd be worthless really, because the light's going over again the subject and not helping. This would be alright for a portraiture, but certainly no good for macro. So what we need to do is just make some minor adjustments. If we bend that down and we shape this item to how we would like it, we can now have an excellent idea of getting the light bouncing down in front of the lens. And now that would engulf the subject in light. And of course it's shapeable. So if you need to move it away from this leaf or something like that, it's in the way, or you want to form a little dome of light, you can easily do that and shape the light in any way you want to make sure it gets over your subject. So let's just turn her on, and we'll do a photo and see how we go. Okay, so here we go. We're going to take a macro shot, just making sure everything's clean and clear. Yes, just getting the focus point exactly where I want it, around the neck of that crane. And there we go, we've taken that photo. To show you there, we've got the photo. I'll demonstrate that of course up on the monitor later, and we'll have a good look and see how that worked out. But that was utilising the autofocus system and the flash with that bounce card to get light sufficiently on the subject, and I think it worked out really good. It looks pretty great. So let me just show you one other little tip and trick you can use. This Flash Bender has Velcro all over it, so that helps you easy with shaping. And if you wanted to form a little tunnel of light, you can also do that. So you can see how that's looking. I'm trying to demonstrate it as best I possibly can for you to see. But see, you've got little Velcro attachments, and you can shape it in any really direction you like. And you can see how there you're going to pop that light immediately all over that subject, and that's going to be amazing, nice and bright and clean. So that's another option. There is one more option, and you can make something like this up yourself. This to purchase is about $100, which I don't think is particularly expensive. I think that's actually quite reasonable really, especially for the versatility you have with it. But let's say you wanted to make something up yourself. Well, is that possible to do that and get a result? Well, it is. I've got one here to demonstrate and illustrate to you now. So I'll show you this one here. But this here is a little jerry-rigged system I made up, and it's not pretty. I know it looks pretty ugly, but it's something I made in my garage out of a bit of plastic. I used a heat gun to shape it into the scoop little arrangement that I wanted. It's sort of like a pyramid-shaped scoop, if you like, or conical scoop. You can see I've got a deflecting shape coming down, which is handy. That's Velcroed on. And what I've done there is I've got Velcro here for the diffusion material. So I can take that on and off as I wish. If I want no diffusion, or if I want it, I can have it. And inside it's all silvery white to give a nice bounce of light around there, because obviously we started with black plastic initially. So I've got the silver white inside, I've got the diffusion material here, and we can fit that onto the speed light. Exactly. So I just put this over the top there. I'll just fit that. And this one here, because there's no Velcro to fasten it to the speed light, what I'm going to do is simply use a little bit of tape. So I'll use a little bit of PVC tape. That's all it takes. It won't interfere in the Speedlight's performance in any way. And I just put that down there, and now of course it won't come off and it'll be nice and secure. So let's just illustrate with that. I'll put that on, turn it on, and now you can see what I've got going on here. You can see how the light is now projected through here. It's sealed in with the diffusion, and it's going to come only over the subject again. So again, we take another shot, come in nice and tight on the neck. There we go. Magnificent. And again, I've got a great shot there. I'm very pleased with that. So I'll show you all those images a little later, and you'll see how they work and how important it is to get the flash. If I took that photo without that flash and that manipulator, that molder of the light, we're going to get no sort of a decent image at all. So lighting is really important. I encourage you to use a speed light of some sort. It doesn't matter what brand or type you've got. Of course, it's all depending on your system that you're using. But the principle here are all the same. The principle of you must have light. And I'll give you a few pictures up in the corners here, and they'll illustrate that I often use 4 speed lights when I'm taking macro photography. If I do it, say, inside in a staged environment, and I've got a rig that'll hold the 4 speed lights up and a concentrated beam of light with 4 of these diffusion domes directly onto my subject. So if I want to shoot at f16, f22 or whatever I wish, and I want a really high shutter speed, I can do that, and I know I'm going to have plenty of light. Now, I don't expect anybody to take 4 speedlights around with them everywhere they go, but that's like a studio sort of arrangement where you've got full control and you've got plenty of accessories. Something like this will certainly do you 99.9% of the time, and is really light and convenient to take around. So if you're out in the garden or wilderness and you're taking some macro photography, this sort of a thing, I mean, you see I'm holding it up here with one hand and it's no struggle. I could even take a photo with one hand. I wouldn't, of course, because I'm trying to secure the camera and keep it steady. And that's the next thing we're going to talk about. How do you keep your camera steady? Well, I'll show you. There's various accessories. Actually, the first thing I'll demonstrate is your poise and position. So when you're taking the photos, what you need to do is make sure that your elbows are into your chest. You're holding the camera with 2 hands, and don't hold it too tight. You don't need to hold it, like you're trying to lift up a truck or something. Just gently hold it in your hands comfortably. Keep your elbows in so you form your body into sort of like a little tripod. And then when you actually are manually focusing it, turn the autofocus off is best option. You just sway your body in and out. So what you're doing is you're not turning the ring. If you try and turn the manual ring while you're there trying to get focus, you're actually maneuvering the camera. So that's going to throw out your positioning and composition, because remember, we're doing it in a very small area and there's not much room for failure or getting out of composition. So the best thing to do is have the manual focus and just sway your body back and forth until you see the focus, and when the focus is spot on, take your photo. And when I say take a photo, I mean take 100 photos. Don't just take one photo and think, oh, I hope I got it. Yeah, you're going to need to take at least 10 to 20 photos to have 3 of them in focus, because the depth of field is that narrow. I can tell you right now, taking one photo and hoping for the best is not going to do it for you. You're going to go home disappointed a lot of the time. So I can't emphasize this enough. Take a lot of photos. If you can afford to take 50 or 100 of your subject, then just keep clicking. Just go click, 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 in and out, get a lot of photos, then you are guaranteed to have at least half a dozen that are going to be razor sharp and focused exactly at the point on the subject you want. Very often you want the eye of the fly. Well, you're not going to get the eye of that creature if taking one photo and hoping for the best. So just keep going back and forth and rocking gently, very slowly, until you get that focus just how you want it, and then take many, many photos. So that's the tip for there. The other option, of course, is you can use stabilization. We'll talk about that in just a second. So stabilization, that's what you're going to need in order to accomplish your goals. Right here, I have a magnificent Viltrox MP365C monopod. Now you can use tripods in this sort of photography, but let's say we're using the illustration that we're moving around. If you're outside in the garden or in the wilderness taking photos of little creatures, you've got very little chance of carrying a tripod everywhere with you and setting it up. By the time you get all the legs out, you get the height just right, and you're manipulating your ball head, and the creature's already flown away. I mean, it's not like a model you're paying to stay there. This thing is not going to cooperate. It's going to try and go as quickly as it can. So because you may startle it. So the trick is to be ready to go and have something light and convenient. And this is one of those composite materials, extremely light and very, very strong. It compacts down very small, but it goes very, very long as well because it has 4 segments. So what I'm going to do is just open this up a little bit and get my height just correct. Alright, so we can go a little bit more. Alright, and once we've got the height correct, we're going to attach it. Now, how do you attach it to your camera? Well, all cameras have a little thread in the bottom there. You just got to find the right thread, push it in, give it a little turn, and you'll screw it in nice and tight. Nice and tight, that's what you want. You want it secure. And now all the weight of that camera and flash are off you. Now the monopod is holding all that weight, which makes it really comfortable. So you not only get the advantage of the stability of having a monopod, but now you've got all the weight bearing taken off as well. So it makes your arms, a lot more stable. So how are we going to take the photo now? Well, what we've got to do is just get the height correct. And then what I do is I don't tend to use a ball head, I'll be honest with you. I tend to, because it's just something else to go wrong and fiddle around for yourself. Just bend the camera to how you want it, just to make the adjustment, the angle. So you get the angle just right, how you want it. Find a little creature, get the right position, that's the way, and there we go. Perfect. And you've got your nice macro photography taken there. All the weight was off you, and you've got a beautiful sharp image that you're going to be really happy and proud of. So I can't recommend something like a monopod of quality more highly, because really it's a great item, very, very convenient and easy to attach. It's just you screw it on, you screw it off, and you're done. And the lighting accessory modifier, whatever you use, that's up to your call. I still believe that for general purpose and value for money, the Rogue Flash Bender is an awesome option. Quick to put on, quick to put off, and very easy to shape and mold how you want it. So this is one subject we've spoken about here. I've shown you this little potted plant thing. Let me remove that, if I can just make this safe for a few seconds. See if I can hold that so I don't actually destroy anything. I'll put this away. And we'll just talk about taking photos of other creatures as well. So I'll show you some various things you can take photos of. So here we have a little jeweled accessory. It's actually a little squirrel, I think, holding a diamond-shaped acorn. Now if I can accurately put him in there, might get him facing me a little bit. It's very hard, I'm just balancing it there on top of that diffuser. And we'll take a photo of him as well. And we'll just show you how the lighting, if you can see the lighting there and how that's working, it really, really makes a big difference having everything set up properly. So here we go, I'm coming in for my subject. Getting focus. I'm actually using autofocus, as I say. Bang, got that photo. Looks magnificent. Very impressed. So yeah, the lighting really makes a big difference and you'll get awesome results. We could also take a photo of this little seal. I'll show you all these photos later, make no mistake. Come in nice and tight on his nose. Pop. Done. Fantastic. And I'll illustrate with this as well. This is some little steppers for filters. So we'll just get it in the right position. And I'm focusing on the 52mm segment. There we go. Fantastic. Look at that. Great result. I'm very impressed with that. So that looks great. And that's how easy it is. It's all just about your stability and your lighting and your settings. Right now, I'm taking these photos at f11, f8 and f11 I've been changing from at 400th of a second. And getting awesome results. I'm very happy with them. So what I'm going to do is to shut this down now. It's enough photos for today. Just take the monopod off. And then I can illustrate things a little bit differently. So as I say, monopod, very good. And you know what else is really cool, and I'll bring this up before I forget, because I'm a fabulous man at forgetting, and then at the end of the video I think, oh, why didn't I talk about this? Because this is a great tip. If we're referring to bugs, say your little bees and your grasshoppers and your little critters like butterflies, how do you get the photos of these guys? How do you obtain the creature? Like, let's say you want to have the creature with you, and you want to bring it into a studio-like arrangement, like I've got with the plant there, and light it all around and take the photo where it's a controlled environment. You can be in the comfort of air conditioning of your home and have full control of lighting and the situation. Well, how do you get a hold of this creature? Well, when I was a little fella, a little young boy, I used to have this sort of a thing. It's called a bug catcher. And what it is, just a simple, cheap plastic toy. I call it a toy, but it's actually specifically was designed to catch bugs. And it's for the interest of children. So what you do is you can have a scoop of the little bug, catch him in there, he'll crawl up. When he crawls up, you put him in there. You can, of course, do it the other way around. You can hold it in here, You sort of scoop him in, close it down. Many ways of getting the bug inside, but once you actually get the creature inside, and I've always found this way the best way, then get him in. If you've got, say, a bit of paper, you can slip the paper under too and catch him nice and quickly. But get the bug in a container, something like this. It's very well ventilated. Don't think you're going to choke the insect. There's lots of ventilation over it. And so keep it into there. You can capture your little creature. And then once you've captured your little creature, bang, you got him off the leaf. Let's say here. Oh, there we go. You know, you've got him. There he is. He's in my little bug catcher now. And we use that little paper crane as an illustration of what we've got. And now what you can do, this is an excellent tip if you're going to try and put him onto a plant and take a photo in your house or in your veranda. Put him, I know this sounds cruel, but please bear with me. This is quite decent and really kind, really. Put the little creature into the refrigerator, not the freezer. We're not trying to, you know, make him an ice block. Just put him in the fridge, in this container, for about 5 minutes. Maybe 10 at the most, 5 to 10 minutes. Depends on your environment. If you're in a cold environment, you probably, 5 minutes is plenty. But if you're in a hot environment as I am, I'm in Queensland, not in Australia, and I tell you what, it's stinky hot all the time. The equivalent to, say, Florida in America. So it's always hot. So if you can cool the bug down just slightly, and it's in the dark area of the refrigerator, obviously the light goes off when you shut the door, it's dark and it's cold, it simulates the nighttime when they sort of like go into hibernation mode. Now you're not trying to hurt or kill this creature, and you're not doing that. What you're doing with 5 or 10 minutes in the fridge, what it's doing is it's immobilizing the creature. It just goes into like a sleep mode, hibernation mode. And then when it's very, very still, you can then, of course, take the creature out and very carefully and very gently and kindly place the creature exactly where you want it on the surface of the item, the plant, frame him up, and you can get all your photos done then, and he'll be basically still for a good 5 to 10 minutes. Now, it hasn't died. It's still alive and well. It's just basically resting. It's in a cool mode. Take your photos where it's nice and still, and then after about 5 or 10 minutes, it starts to get active and move around again. When you can see him starting to get active, whack him back in your little bud catcher, and then take him outside, and you release him. And he's as good as gold. You haven't hurted it anyway. You've just made him cool and calm for the photos. So that's a little tip and trick that you may not have thought of. You can buy these at toy stores or online, and I think they're about $10 or $15. They're not particularly expensive, but it's an excellent tool in order to acquire subjects. So I thought that was an interesting tip, and I wanted to make sure I definitely brought that out. So in conclusion, the last thing we're going to talk about today is the various lenses. Now, as I mentioned, of course, the Nikon 105. There is a 105 macro lens specifically for your Nikon Z system. But the thing is, that lens is about $1,700. That's a lot of money to spend on a lens if you were not too sure what you were doing. So this is where it comes back to buying something like some extension tubes, and you'll see the results from them, and you'll see that there are fantastic results. And it's no second quality operation. But you don't need to buy necessarily a macro lens, although if you're very serious and you're committed to take a lot of shots, then by all means I highly recommend you buying some good quality gear. I'm not reserving that away at all. I buy good quality lenses and equipment for a reason, because it makes the user experience so much better. So once you've got your confidence up with those extension tubes, then you can afford to buy maybe a decent lens specifically for the job. But I will emphasize this when we talk about lenses and in macro photography. With macro photography, and excuse the pun, size matters. The length of the lens definitely relates to how much more enjoyable the photography is. Let me illustrate again with our little friend here, a little subject. Alright, so I'll get my little pretend bug out. And we put him onto our little here, and we're going to take some macro photography of our little friend there. And I'll illustrate using what we have. I don't want to have to swap lenses around to demonstrate this, it takes too long. But assuming that we're, in fact what I'll do is I'll take the speed light off only for demonstration purposes, because that way you can see what's going on a little bit better. So I'm at 70 mils here. If I was at 50 mil, and let's face it, Nikon do make a 50 mil macro as well. If I'm using 50 mils, I'm in that close. Like you're almost touching the creature. You've literally got like maybe less than an inch from the subject to your end of your camera. And that's very potential at spooking the subject, isn't it? So you easily spook them, easily shadow and you can't get light on it easily. It's more difficult for you when you're in that close. but that's because it's 50 mils. It's like a wider angle. Now, if you can get to, say, 100 mils, like the 100-105, for example, or what I've been using for a very long time, a Tonica 100mm f2.8, and it's a manual focus lens, which is what I use for macro anyway. And that's a beautiful lens. I'll show you some illustrations and pictures of where I've been using it and how, and some of the photo samples that I've taken using that Tonica lens. It's a beautiful lens and works very well. I think it's valued around about only $500. You can buy them on eBay quite cheaply, and they're of awesome quality. It's a simple structured lens, but a beautiful design. And certainly works very well. So anyway, at that range, we're talking about 100 mils now, like that Tonica or maybe the 105 Nikon, you're now this far away from your subject. So you're further away. Now that helps you not spook the subject. It helps you get light over and into the area, so that way you can illuminate them much better. You've got more lighting choices. So maybe you don't have to have just the one light over the top now, engulf it. What you can do is you have some lights on the side as well, or utilize the sun and the light because you've got a bit of distance between you. Now it doesn't stop there. Sigma, for example, make a 150mm f2.8 macro. And I would have to say that 150 millimeters would probably be the most generally ideal focal length for macro photography. So what's happening now at 150 mils, you're not at the 50 mil range, you're not at the 100 mil range, now you're at 150 mils. You're actually getting some decent distance, a couple of inches away from your subject there at least, and that enables you again better lighting, better control, and less spooking of the subject. And you can actually see what's going on too now. You know, where if you're like this, the only thing you do is look through the viewfinder. You can't even see the creature because your whole camera is engulfing it. So at 150 mil, you're getting back at a decent distance in order to take a great photo, but at the same time have some decent lighting opportunities. And Nikon also do make a 200 mil f4. Now this is a D series lens, and it's probably one of the world's standard best macro lenses available for the general public. And it's often used for scientific work and museum pieces, etc. Now that's obviously a longer lens and a heavy lens, but at 200 mil, of course, what's going to happen now? It's that whole focal length, closest focal range situation. Where at 200 mils, you're coming back here. You've got multiple inches away from your subject, and now obviously the lighting and the control and the less spookiness of it to the subject is even better. So I'm encouraging you to go the longest focal length you possibly can with macro photography. Yeah, sure, start out with some extension tubes and an existing, 24-70 if that's what you've got. But other than that, if you get excited and you really want to get involved in it, you get the bug of macro photography, excuse the pun, yes, then you can, of course, invest in whatever you can afford. But as I say, for about $400 to $500, you can get that Tonica 100mm 2.8, which is a fantastically highly recommended lens that I've been using for years. You can advance up a bit more money and get the Sigma. Now the Sigma 150mm 2.8 lens, that's about $900. That's very affordable for a macro lens, considering that the Nikon 105 is $1,600 Australian. So it's almost half the price, and it's probably twice as good at doing the job. I'm not bagging Nikon's macro lens here, don't misunderstand, but I'm talking about your bang for your buck, how much you have to spend and what result you get versus spending a lot less and getting probably a better result just because of the branding. It's an off-camera brand. But those Sigma lenses are awesome. I've owned a 135mm 1.8 prime, which I use for headshots, and that was a brilliant lens and worked excellently well on the Nikon system using the FTZ adapter. So let's not underestimate how good they can be. So there are many choices for you, many choices, and I encourage you to explore, well, the best you can afford with your budget. So that's really all I have to say about macro photography for the time. I hope you found some interesting tips and tricks that have been useful to you, and I hope they'll advance your skill sets. So I'm really encouraging people to use stability. If you can use a monopod, we're just reviewing some of the ideas we've gone over. Speed light with the correct sort of manipulator modifier to get the light exactly on the subject where you want it. That's really important. Also making sure you've got at least f8 to f11 as your settings so you can get enough actually in focus. So those sort of the basic tips that I think are really important with macro photography. Longest focal length you can possibly get is also helpful. Don't use the extension tubes with a long lens. you're really going to be sticking around the 50 to 70 mils maximum with extension tubes. That's just how they're structured and designed. If you want to go on a longer focal length, you can really want to buy a specific macro lens. So thank you once again for your time. I hope I've been useful. If you've got any comments and points of interest you want to make, please share them in the comments. I always like to hear new ideas and new tips, and that's exactly why I make these videos. Why am I talking about macro photography? It's a lot of it's actually confidence. It's about getting your confidence in what you're doing. The more times you hear someone like me who's had experience tell you the same things that everybody else is telling you, the more you realize that's what you need to be doing. So the more times you hear it, the more confidence you've got to do it, the more confidence you've got of buying the correct products and making sure you're set up to have a successful time. So I wish you all the success in the world with your macro photography. Enjoy the sample photos that I've put up, and thank you very much for your time.